In the early months of 2024, an intellectual being who is also a knowledge worker did something that looked like professional suicide by modern standards. He was at the height of his output. He had built a platform centered on the ideas of focus, depth, and meaning. But privately, he was a man living in a house of cards. Every time he stood in an elevator, his hand reached for his pocket before the doors even closed. Every time he sat down to write, he found himself checking a feed just to see if the world had changed in the last 15 minutes. He was a teacher of depth who was drowning in the shallows. So one Tuesday afternoon, he did not post. He did not send an email. He simply stopped. He unplugged the microphone, put a dust cover over his monitors, and simply walked away. 1 week turned into a month turned into a year. Eventually, the streaks were broken, the algorithms stopped suggesting his work, and the digital ghost of his presence began to fade. People in his circle asked, is he burned out? Did he fail? Or did he lose interest? But the truth was more clinical. He was conducting an experiment. He had realized that he was suffering from a modern malady, one that does not show up on an X-ray, but one that is quietly eroding the mental health of an entire generation. It is called solitude deprivation. It is the state where the human brain is never ever left alone with its own thoughts. From the moment we wake up to the moment we fall asleep, we are tethered to a Gutenberg galaxy of infinite inputs. We have replaced the inner voice with a constant stream of external ones. That creator spent around 730 days in that silence. He was not away. He was finally, for the first time in a decade, present. He was relearning how to be a human being in a world that only wants us to be users. You can be that person. Maybe you haven't walked away from your job or deleted every account you own, but you know that phantom reach for the phone. You know that feeling of sitting in a quiet house and yet feeling like your mind is a crowded terminal. You know the exhaustion of being available to everyone at all times while being increasingly unavailable to yourself. I have realized something fundamental. The deep life is not just a productivity hack. It is not a trick to get more emails sent or a way to optimize your morning routine. It is a survival strategy. In a world that is designed to harvest your attention until there is nothing left but a shell of a person, reclaiming your solitude is the only way to stay human. I am Rushen, and you are listening to the Tech Files. And today, we are going to look at the high cost of the connected life and why the most radical thing you can do in 2026 is nothing at all. To understand why we feel so fragmented, we have to start with a definition. When I say solitude, I'm not talking about being a hermit. This is not about moving to a cabin or even being physically alone. Think of it as a state in which your mind is even momentarily free from input from other human minds. Think about that for a second. By this definition, you can be alone in a mountain range, but if you are listening to a podcast, yes, even this one, you are not in solitude. You are processing my thoughts, my syntax, my arguments. If you're sitting in a quiet room reading a book, you are in a conversation with the author. If you are scrolling a feed, you are in a chaotic high-speed collision with 1,000 different minds at once. Solitude is not about the absence of people, it is about the absence of input. Now, why does the brain care? Why is input-free time is so vital? To answer that, we have to look at a discovery made in the late 1990s by neuroscientists. For a long time, researchers thought that when the brain was not focused on a specific task like doing math or driving a car, it just turned off or went into a low power state. They were wrong. When you stop focusing on the outside world, a massive interconnected web of brain regions flickers to life. Neuroscientists call this the default mode network, or the DMN for short. I want you to try and visualize the default mode network not as a complex medical term, but as your brain's background processor. Think of it like the maintenance crew that comes into a stadium after the game is over. They clean the seats, they prepare the turf, they prepare the space for the next event. When you are standing in the line at the grocery store, just staring at the back of a cereal box, or when you are taking a long shower without a waterproof speaker blasting music, your DMN is finally allowed to work overtime. It starts doing the heavy lifting that we have been neglecting. It begins the work of self-reflection, asking the deep, often uncomfortable questions about who you actually are and what you truly believe when no one is watching. It engages in moral reasoning, which is that quiet internal process of evaluating your actions and figuring out your place in the world. But perhaps most importantly, the DMN handles what psychologists call autobiographical memory. This is the process of taking the messy, fragmented, and often overwhelming events of your day and filling them away into a coherent story of your life. Without this processing time, your life is not a story. It is just a list of things that happen to you. When we kill these moments of solitude with a screen, we are not just killing time. We are firing the maintenance crew. We are leaving the stadium a mess and then wondering why a few days later we feel so mentally exhausted. But here is the crisis. The default mode network is incredibly fragile. The moment you pick up your phone to check a notification, or the moment you plug in to a digital input, the DMN shuts down. The brain switches back to a mode what we call a task-positive mode. For the first time in human history, we have found a way to systematically eliminate the in-between moments. We have optimized away the gaps. In 2026, we are living through a massive unintended biological experiment. What happens to a human being who never triggers their default mode network? What happens to a person who never processes their own life because they are too busy consuming the stories of others? The result is what we call cognitive thinning. When you suffer from solitude deprivation, your sense of self begins to feel thin. You feel reactive instead of proactive. You start to find that your opinions aren't really yours. They are just the average of the last 5 things you read. You feel a low-grade background anxiety, not because something is wrong, but because your brain has a backlog of unprocessed emotions and events that it hasn't been allowed to work through. If you pay close attention the next time you find yourself without a screen, you will likely notice a very specific sensation. It is a physical itch. It is that phantom reach for a pocket, that restless feeling in your chest when you realize you have 30 seconds of nothing ahead of you. It is the sound of a brain that has been so conditioned to being fed, constantly spoon-fed information, entertainment, and noise, that it has effectively forgotten how to hunt. You might find, as many of us have, that you actually have to relearn the skill of being bored. You have to train yourself all over again to let a single thought sit in your mind for more than 10 seconds without the reflexive urge to solve it, to Google it, or to immediately share it with the world. It is a realization that hits you in the quiet moments. We haven't just lost our focus, we have lost the ability to let a thought breathe before we stifle it with more content. We have been told that boredom is a defect. We have been told that dead time is a waste of a life. But the truth is the opposite. Boredom is the gateway to the deep life. It is the silence between the notes that makes the music possible. If you are listening to this right now and you feel burned out, I want you to consider the possibility that you are not actually overworked. You might just be over-inputted. Your brain is not tired of doing. It is tired of listening to everyone else except you. To understand how we got here, we have to look at a fundamental shift in the architecture of our daily lives. A shift that happened so gradually we almost did not notice the floor moving beneath us. If you close your eyes for a moment and travel back to a waiting room in the year 2000, maybe you are at the dentist or you are waiting for a flight. If you look around that room in the year 2000, what do you see? You see people staring at the wall. You see someone flipping through a 6-month-old copy of National Geographic. You see people just sitting. In early 2000s, boredom was a fact of life. It was a common, everyday occurrence. In those gaps, you probably thought about your grocery list. You replayed a conversation you had with your spouse that morning. You looked out the window and noticed the way the light hit the trees. Well, you were essentially processing your day in real time. Now, contrast that with the waiting room of 2026. If you walk into that same room today, the silence is different. It is heavy. Every single head is bowed. Every pair of eyes is locked onto a smartphone. We have reached a point where we treat boredom not as a natural state of being, but as a medical emergency. The second the input stops, the moment the elevator door closes, the second the coffee machine starts brewing, the very heartbeat after we finish a task, we feel a surge of cognitive panic. We feel an urgent, almost primal need to treat the boredom immediately with a dose of digital dopamine. We have turned the smartphone into a universal pacifier. Just as a restless infant is given a pacifier to stop the crying, we reach for the feed to stop the thinking. But there is a high price for this constant medication. When you treat boredom as an emergency, you lose the ability to navigate the liminal spaces of your life. These are the transitional moments where your best ideas are born. When you kill the waiting room, you kill the insight. You see, the brain doesn't just need rest. It needs unstructured time. It needs the gaps. But today, the digital attention economy has mapped out every square inch of our day. It has colonized the cracks. There are no more in-between moments because there is always another thread to pull, another video to watch, another emergency to attention in the palm of your hand. We have traded our grocery list thoughts and our quiet reflections for a world where we are never alone, but we are never truly present. We have traded the waiting room for a waiting life, always waiting for the next hit of dopamine to tell us what to think next. If you find yourself nodding along to this, you might be asking, okay, so I check my phone in line, so I don't like being bored. Is it really that big of a deal? The answer is yes. Because when we systematically eliminate solitude, we don't just lose quiet time, we lose three fundamental pillars of the human experience. The first is emotional resilience. Psychologists have a term called autoregulation. It is the brain's ability to process a difficult emotion, a snub from a colleague, a worry about the future, a moment of self-doubt, and bring itself back to a state of equilibrium. But here's the catch. Autoregulation requires a holding space. It requires you to sit with the discomfort long enough for the brain to categorize it and move past it. When you feel a minor stress and immediately drown it out with a 15-second video or a news headline, you are not relaxing. You are suppressing. You are effectively pausing the emotional processing bar. Over months and years, those unprocessed minor stresses don't disappear. They aggregate into a permanent state of high alert anxiety. You feel brittle because you have never allowed yourself the solitude to resolve the small things. The second thing we lose is originality. If your brain is constantly being fed a diet of other people's tweets, other people's pictures, and other people's arguments, you eventually stop being a creator and you become a remixer. You become a router that just passes information through without adding any of your own soul to the mix. Deep, original insights require what scientists call an incubation period. This is that mysterious phase where the brain takes two disparate ideas and rubs them together to see if they create a spark. But sparks don't happen in a crowded room. They happen in the dark. They happen when the external inputs stop and the internal associations begin. Without solitude, you are effectively living in a permanent input mode, which means your output will only ever be a diluted version of what everyone else is already saying. Thirdly, we have to talk about one of the most famous subjects, which is burnout. We have a massive misunderstanding of what burnout actually is. We tend to think burnout is the result of too much work. We think that if we had a shorter to-do list, we would be fine. But I want to propose a different definition. Burnout is not just too much work, it is too little recovery. And here's the hard truth. Scrolling through a social media feed is not recovery. Checking your email on the couch is not recovery. These are high dopamine, low fidelity activities. They keep your brain in a state of task-positive alertness. True cognitive recovery is found almost exclusively in solitude. It is the power-down state of the default mode network we discussed earlier. When you deprive yourself of that state, you are running your mental engine at red line RPMs, 24 hours a day. You are not burned out because your job is hard. You are burned out because you have forgotten how to let your mind go offline while you are still awake. We have traded our resilience for distraction, our originality for consumption, and our health for a connectedness that actually leaves us empty. We are essentially starving our souls of the one thing they need to grow, the space to just be. I know that after listening to the consequences of solitude deprivation, the impulse might be to take your phone and throw it into the nearest body of water. But let's be realistic. We live in a world that demands we stay connected. You have a job, you have family and friends that you need to be in touch with you, and you have responsibilities. The goal is not to delete your digital life. The goal is to build a roadmap back to your inner life. And we start that journey not by deleting apps, but by changing physical habits. We start with what I call the low friction start. Let me give you 3 tactics right away to get started. Tactic number 1 is the phoneless walk. This is the simplest and yet for many the most terrifying exercise. Can you go for a 20-minute walk with no headphones, no music, no podcasts, not even this one? Here is the story behind the phoneless walk and why I think this tactic is a good start. The first 10 minutes are going to be painful. You will feel that itch we talked about earlier. Your brain will scream for a hit of dopamine. You will feel bored, perhaps even a little anxious. But if you can push through that 10-minute wall, you will feel something strange. The dust of the day starts to settle. Around the 12 or 15-minute mark, your brain realizes it's not being fed with dopamine, so it starts to hunt. This is where the ideas happen. This is where the solutions to the problems you have been trying to solve suddenly bubble up to the surface. You will realize the brain fog starting to clear. Tactic number 2 is what I call the morning buffer. The most vulnerable time for your attention is the moment you wake up. When you check your phone in bed, you are essentially letting 1,000 strangers into your bedroom to tell you what to think about before you have even had a glass of water. I recommend a 30-minute buffer. No inputs for the first half hour of your day. No news, no email, no scrolling through social feeds. This allows your brain to warm up using its own internal temperature rather than being shocked into someone else's agenda. Now, I know many of you are knowledge workers operating on global time. You might be in Asia working for a company in the UK or in the Philippines answering to a team in the USA. Wherever you are located and whatever your working hours may be, checking your phone on your work computer is not just a habit, it is a job requirement. You wake up to a backlog of emergencies. If that is you, I suggest a closed loop buffer. What does that mean? Simply check your messages for true catastrophes, the house on fire emails for exactly 5 minutes. Then put the phone down and step away for 20. Use those 20 minutes to shower, make coffee, or sit in silence. You have addressed the emergency, but you have refused to let the feed take over your morning. You are still the one in charge of your first thoughts. Tactic number 3 is embrace friction. The digital world we live in is designed to be frictionless. It wants you to slide from one app to another without ever hitting a bump. To fight back, we have to intentionally reintroduce friction. We do this by choosing single-purpose tech. Essentially, these are tools that do one thing well but do not run on an algorithm. Think back to the technology we had before algorithms took over. A physical notebook is a perfect example. There is no notification in a notebook, your journal, or planner. When you write on paper, the only input is your own hand associated with your brain. Apart from pen and paper, you can use modern devices that is deep life friendly. Switch to a dedicated e-ink device. Tools like the Remarkable tablet or a basic Kindle. They give you the convenience of storing multiple books, but the friction of a device that can't access Instagram or TikTok. If you like gaming, consider purchasing a dedicated gaming device. Instead of playing a microtransaction heavy game on your phone that is designed to keep you playing, use a dedicated handheld like a Steam Deck or a Nintendo Switch. You can go old school and go back to a PlayStation Portable or Game Boy if you are nostalgic. These are closed environments. These games have a beginning and an end. If you enjoy writing, consider AlphaSmart or Neo. These are digital typewriters from the 90s and early 2000s that many writers are returning to. They have a screen that only shows a few lines of text and no internet. It is a tool for creation, not consumption. This way you won't be distracted. By moving your important activities such as your thinking, your reading, your playing onto devices that don't have an algorithm attached to them, they are reclaiming the borders of your mind. You are choosing tools that serve you rather than tools that use you as the product. As we close this first episode back, I want to be clear about why I'm here and what this show is going to be moving forward. I know that your feed is already crowded. I know you have 100 different voices competing for your attention every single day. I did not come back after a hiatus to add to that volume. My promise to you is this: I'm not back to fill your ears with noise. I'm here to help you find the signal. This show will never be about hacks to get more done in a day so you can scroll more at night. It is about the radical act of reclaiming your humanity from the machines. I want to leave you with one final thought, an image to carry with you through the rest of your week. Think of your mind as a garden. Solitude is the soil in which the deep life grows. It is the literal ground of your being. But if that soil is crowded with weeds, with other people's tweets, viral TikTok videos, endless headlines, and the outrage of the hour, nothing of yours can take root. Your own ideas, your own peace, your own original insights, they simply do not have the space to grow. You cannot cultivate a deep life in a shallow, crowded plot of land. You have to pull the weeds. You have to protect the soil. So, here is my challenge to you this week. I want you to choose just one analog activity. It doesn't have to be big. Maybe it's washing the dishes without a podcast. Maybe it is sitting on your porch for 10 minutes with a cup of coffee and no phone. Maybe it is just walking from your car to your office in total silence. As you do this, I want you to pay attention. Notice the itch. Notice the moment your brain tries to convince you that you are missing out on something important. Don't fight the itch. Just observe it. Recognize it for what it is, the sound of a mind trying to find its way back to itself. It feels good to be back. It feels even better to know you are on the other end of this conversation. If this episode resonated with you, or if you know someone who is currently drowning in the noise, I would be honored if you shared it with them. Thanks for listening. Let's get to work.